Hey everybody, it's Christina Holloway here. Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're going to talk about 5 tips to keep in mind as you participate in the company's exit interview, especially if you're leaving a toxic work environment and a toxic boss. It will feel really good to finally spill the beans on how toxic this boss really is, but there are some things to keep in mind so that you keep your integrity and professional reputation intact. Real quick, if you enjoy this content and want to learn more about how to make power moves in your career, make sure to follow my channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video from me. Don't forget to download your free communication toolkit, which teaches you the 5 ways to communicate with impact and confidence as you build trust, authority, and influence to grow your career. I'm going to share my story. Yes, I have one, but if you'd rather get to the tips, you're welcome to skip ahead. I've provided chapters so you can get right to it. When I was in my 20s, I had a job at a company for about 3.5 years, and I was one of a number of executive assistants to the executive team at this company. We were in a pool, but we would get assigned permanent positions when they came available. So I had worked with a few executives, but it was the last one that was horrible. I had transferred into this assignment from a previous bad boss, which I'll discuss in another video. It has its own lesson. But this one was fine for about a year. In the process, I was looking for another job because I didn't want to be an executive assistant at this company. There was no path forward and I wanted to do something different. So at this time, I had finally done my job interviews and received an offer. So I was about to submit my 2 weeks notice. And at the same time, my boss told me to submit an expense report that had personal expenses on it. And I told him that it might not get approved, and he told me do it anyway and make it look like it was a business trip. So fine, I did it. Well, sure enough, accounting called me the following week and said there were problems with the expense report and that they would not reimburse for those expenses. I didn't think anything of it, but a few weeks later, my boss started telling me that my work quality was slipping and that I wasn't meeting his expectations. And at the same time, he had an associate who would sit in on the meetings and give his 2 cents. And it was very strange, and at the time, I felt blindsided. It took me a while to realize that this was about the expense reports. In the meantime, I had negotiated the offer from the other company and I had tendered my resignation. I still had to stay there for 2 weeks. At that point, the associate started harassing me and became verbally abusive. And I was hurt. I was stunned at how fast things changed and how blatantly abusive he was, even in front of other people. He didn't seem to care who heard him. And at one point during the final week I was there, he cornered me in an office and he told me that he was going to call the new company to tell them how terrible I was. He was threatening to torpedo my new job prospect. I found that alarming and I just stared at him, and I was standing while he was sitting and I leaned forward and I said, "Are you threatening me?" And he didn't say anything. So I said it again, "Are you threatening me?" And he leaned back in his chair like he was pulling away. So I left the room. To be clear, I don't think I intimidated him. I was having a visceral response to his threat and he withdrew. And at the end of the week, I had an exit interview. Today, I'm going to go over 5 tips on how to stay mindful while I also go further into my crappy experience because there's more. All right, so let's get started. Number 1, find your confidence and prepare in advance. The overwhelming advice is to stay professional and not say anything and leave with dignity, knowing that you didn't lower yourself to that level. Fine, but let's be realistic. There are plenty of us who have gone out in a blaze of glory and didn't regret it for a minute. And while that feels good, we're going to talk about how to do it in a more professional way. So, first, you need to be prepared with what you're going to say and who you're going after. For me, I started to get the idea that accounting wasn't just chalking the expense reports up to an incompetent executive assistant, because I had a history of submitting expense reports accurately with other executives. So I started to understand that someone was going to take the fall. I also started to understand that the person who was harassing me was told to do it by someone else. Now, I could have talked all about my toxic boss who asked me to submit fraudulent reports, but I knew that was already out there. And I knew that my boss and his associate were hoping that when I left, the problem would go away. It did not. So I went after the associate in my exit interview. Number 2, remain professional and stick to the facts. I knew that he could deny the private conversations we had because no one heard them. But I also knew plenty of people had heard him being toxic, specifically to me, and they were also executives. So I talked about those incidents because eventually HR could start asking around and find someone willing to talk. And that was usually the other executive assistants and the other executives in the office. Number 3, be constructive because you're giving feedback. Anchor all of it inside your values. For me, it was about reminding them that I had 3.5 years of excellent work with other executives and they couldn't touch that. Nobody could argue about my level of work and my integrity. The leadership team was catching on that the bigger problem was this executive. I anchored everything down to how toxic the associate had become in the last few weeks and months before I left, and that the reason I couldn't stay any longer was because of a breakdown in accountability and a toxic environment that left me feeling unsafe. I anchored all of it to a slide into a toxic culture and not about one toxic boss at the top. Number 4, respect the confidentiality of others who are staying behind. I did not name names when it came to witnesses of the abusive behavior. I did tell them that there were plenty of people who witnessed this behavior and that HR needed to start asking questions to get to the bottom of it. Remember that just because you're leaving, that doesn't mean the problem is gone. Other people have to stay and deal with the fallout. You don't want to make life harder for those that cannot leave when you do. The first thing HR did was talk to the other people who sat around me in the open area. Of course, they may have something to say, but they could also choose not to, just to protect themselves. And that's their choice. It's a sign of a toxic work environment. Number 5, talk about your bigger experiences with the company. Like I said, I had been there for 3.5 years. I was able to talk about my bigger experiences and especially about what I found valuable about the things I had learned from previous executives who were good bosses. One department where I worked for a year liked me so much that they always took me with on business trips to manage the documents and ensure that the business deal went smoothly. I had built up quite a reputation as a thorough and competent person, and I talked about those experiences and some of the best work I had done there. When you talk in those terms, you're able to express that you loved the company and the job, but that the people who were deteriorating the culture were becoming the problem. And there's no resentment. These are my values. The business has changed with new leadership, and the values no longer align. I'm sorry, but I cannot stay, and that's that. This is a bonus tip for you. Remember, in your exit interview, you are leaving with your head held high. If you tendered your resignation, then you're the one leaving on a high note, and you're leaving on your terms. You totally get to articulate your narrative of what went wrong and why. Consider looking at the exit interview as a way to give insight into what it's like to work in the trenches of this business. If there appears to be a gap between expectations and reality, you can express without emotion how certain elements of the work environment would benefit from a review and overhaul. Since I've worked here 3.5 years, here's my advice. Take it or leave it, you know? On a final note, about 5 years later, I was still working at that better job, and I had been assigned to a project with a large contractor pool. Wouldn't you know, that associate was now contracting for this company as part of a contractor pool. I did not interact with him, and he did not reach out or interact with me. But come on, how random. He had either left that other company or was asked to leave, and now he was working in a contractor pool doing something completely unrelated to the work he had been doing before, and he had a better job before. I like to think that somewhere along the line he was handed a slice of humble pie. In hindsight, I wasn't fired, but I do believe they were starting to build a case to have me fired and take the fall. I just happened to find another job. I was also looking for another job because I wanted to do meaningful work. The environment hadn't turned toxic until a few months before I left. So, in conclusion, keep your head held high, stick to the facts, and approach the conversation with integrity, high standards, and a nod to your professional reputation. All right, so that's it for my video on how to handle an exit interview when you have a bad boss. Let me know down in the comments what kind of experience you've had. I know there are other stories like mine, and I'd love to hear them. Don't forget to download my free communication toolkit, which I provided in the link below. And if you enjoyed watching this video and you found it helpful, please make sure you give it a big thumbs up by hitting that like button, and make sure you're subscribed to my channel so you never miss another video from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.